Hi guys, and welcome to this hands-on lab. So in this lab, what I'm going to do is just walk you through the VPC console. We're not going to create anything in this particular lab. What we're going to do is just go in and have a look around, and I want to help you to understand the way that the VPC structure is set up when you first log into your account. So let's head over to the console and start having a look around. On that AWS management console, I'm going to head to networking and content delivery, choose VPC, and we can now see the resources in this particular region. So now that's important to note. This is a region-specific service. In the top right-hand corner here, we can see I have Sydney selected. In the top right-hand corner here, we can see I have Sydney selected. So what we're looking at here is specific to the Sydney region. We can see the number of VPCs, the number of subnets, in this case I have 3, route tables I have 1, internet gateways I have 1, and so on. Now we will be covering all of these features within this course. Now what I could do is click on the drop down box and then choose one of the many regions. So in this case I'm going to choose US East North Virginia. So now we're in North Virginia. We can see we still have 1 VPC, but we have 6 subnets. Now the reason for this is what happens when you create your account is it automatically creates a VPC in every region. And it creates a subnet, which is going to be a public subnet, which means it will have public IP addresses for your resources. It creates one of those per availability zone. And in US East North Virginia, there are 6 availability zones, so we have 6 subnets. Whereas in Sydney, we have 3 availability zones, so we only had 3 subnets. Now, if we look on the left here and go to Your VPCs, this is where we can see the VPC associated with this particular region. We have the VPC ID, and we can see the IPv4 CIDR block, and it doesn't have an IPv6 CIDR block by default. If we then go down to subnets, we can see all 6 subnets, and each of these will have an IPv4 network address that's part of, it's a subset of the IPv4 CIDR block range associated to the VPC. If we scroll across a little, we can see the available IPv4 addresses. And in this case, because it uses a /20 CIDR block, we get quite a lot. So we get 4,091 IPv4 addresses that we can use. And you can see how each subnet is associated with a different availability zone. So here we have US East 1A, then we have 1B, C, D, E, and F. If we scroll over a bit further as well, we'll see a couple of other things. So we have a route table. So by default, a route table is created known as the main route table. Now you can't delete that, but you can associate your subnets with different route tables if you want to. But by default, they'll be associated with this route table. They also have a network ACL, which is a security technology. It's basically a firewall operating at the subnet level. Now we can see that this is a default subnet. It has auto-assigned public IPv4 addresses set to yes. So that means if we launched an EC2 instance into one of these subnets, by default it would get an IPv4 public IP address, so it would be accessible on the internet. So let's pop down to route tables now, and let's see how the route table is configured. We can see we have one route table, and in the bottom box here, we've got some information, so we can choose routes, and we'll see what's configured by default. So by default, we've got the IPv4 CIDR block with a target of local. So remember, that means that the implicit router in the VPC is going to route all traffic. So any of those subnet ranges, if we look at the subnets, we've got all these various ranges. Those are all within this overall block of ranges. So if you were trying to talk from any one of those IPv4 ranges, these different subnets, to any other subnet in that overall address range, then the implicit router is going to route that connection. And then we have the IPv4 any address. So the 0.0.0.0/0 means any other address essentially. So if it's not an address within this range, it's an address within this range, and therefore it will go to this particular device. So this target is the internet gateway. Now we'll get onto that in a moment. Let's look at the associations. So as you can see, we have these 6 associations. Those are our 6 subnets, and they're currently all associated with the main route table. Now let's go down to internet gateways. So we can see that we have an internet gateway and it's attached. So internet gateways are attached to your VPC, and then you can use them when you have a target in your route table to be able to send data out to the internet. And your EC2 instances will also need public IP addresses in order to be able to use the internet gateway and talk on the internet. Now you'll note there's something called an egress-only internet gateway. That's for IPv6, and we'll talk about that a bit more later on in the section when I have a lesson showing you how to configure IPv6 in a VPC. And we've got lots of other different features as well, and we'll cover those throughout this section. So that's all I wanted to do for this lesson, just to show you around, and we've got a bit more theory, and then we're going to start creating our own VPCs on AWS.